Welcome back to the garden. Today's gonna be our first video on trying to become and set up and become self-sufficient. The first rule of any self-sufficiency is water and food. So we're gonna start with the food first. I don't wanna grow on a large scale, that's just wasted space. I used to grow a big garden in this area when my children lived at home. It worked me to death and it was way more food. So I wanna start with some raised beds. Those are coming, we're gonna do a little video on that. I'm waiting to get the material for it. Today, we're gonna build a temporary compost bin. I've been studying compost in the garden and these raised beds that we're gonna build. We need to get started making compost. I don't really have the money to buy the material to build them like I want them, but from what I've studied, this will work until I can get that money. So we're gonna build a temporary compost so that we can start gathering the green stuff that's dying off a plant so that it don't go to waste to mix with our browns. I'll explain that in the video when we start loading the compost bin, what I've been studying. This should work, we're gonna try it. So it's gonna be real simple. I got some posts like you see here. We're gonna build a 3-sided wired in with wire and then just a temporary front with a piece of tin shoved up against it so we can get in there and mix it and turn it. I'm just gonna lay out and mark on the ground with a tape measure. I'm not gonna make you watch all this part, but I'm gonna mark out a 4-foot square, the corners on them, and I'm gonna dig them holes. Each post is used, so I'm gonna measure that post. I know I want it 4 foot high. I'm gonna make a mark, measure back from the other end, see what's left. That's how deep I'll dig the hole. Now, I'm not gonna get carried away on this when we're trying to square it up and level everything, because this is temporary. When I do build the others, we'll probably do a video on it, and I will try to pretty it up. It don't have to be pretty, but it just looks good when everything's square and it don't take that much extra work. So today, we're just gonna get these 4 posts put in the ground, some wire wrapped around them so we can go to mixing some stuff so we don't lose all this green vegetation on our other plants and have to throw it away that we could use in this composting. And here in about 2 or 3 days, I'll probably have a video if the weather holds out like it has on composting and what I've studied on it. We're gonna try to apply that and see if it works, because to grow like I want to grow and be able to afford to grow like I want to grow, I got enough stuff on the area where I live that I can create my own compost to feed my plant. So that's what I want to do. So let's get started. Post number 1 is in the ground. Now we're gonna come over 4 foot and we're gonna put another one just like it. Now we got our second post up right here and we're fixing to put 2 more behind it, but I wanted to pause right here. I want to give you a tip. If you decide to get into composting, as I told you, this is temporary for me. I'm building something different. It should work just fine, but if I were gonna do it, something I'd do different than what you're gonna see me do today, I'm gonna just put a piece of tin over it to hold it. Problem with that is now if you're using it and flipping it, you're either having to take it off and everything's spilling out, or you're having to reach over and down, which makes it harder. If you decide to stay and do a wire one like this, what I would do is trim it out where you have 2 little shells, and I would get me some 2x8s and drop in the front. Then, as you're working that pile and using it, you don't have it spilling out. You can slide out a 2x8, take what you need out in your wheelbarrow. When you get down low, slide out another 2x8, and the same for filling it. It'd make it much more versatile. That's what you're gonna see on the ones that I told you we're gonna build in the future. Today, I'm just gonna use a piece of tin. I just wanted to point that out. If you decide to go with the wire style, I'd really consider that type front door on it, from what I've read. 2 things you want to consider before we get started building this. You want it in sun. You want it where it gets a lot of sun, because you want to be able to generate that heat in it in between stirring it. And number 2, you want it in ease of access. That consists of actually 2 parts. You want to be able to get a little water to it, so if it's dry that season, it needs a little bit of moisture to work. Like I say, we're gonna do a video on composting, so you'll see that a little more in depth on that. And number 2, you need to be able to get to it and work it with your wheelbarrow. If it's not convenient to use, you're not gonna use it. So it needs to be kind of over to the side out of your way, but it also needs to be easily accessible. Keep that in mind. I've chose the second best place to save the first for the permanent. On your wire selection, the smaller the mash, the better. You'd be much better if this is gonna be permanent to go with a 1/2x1 or a 1x2 welded wire. As for me, it's not permanent. I have some scrap chicken wire here I was given, so I'm gonna use that. Like I say, if it's permanent, you need something a little better than this. It won't hold up through the composting very many years before you're having to redo it. So get a heavier wire, do it right the first time. So we got all 4 of our posts in. Now we're gonna cover these 3 sides with our poultry wire. I'll bring you in and let you see that. We're 4 foot tall and our posts are 4 foot wide, approximately. To affix that wire to them posts, we're gonna use these little poultry staples and a hammer and just drop them in. So we got our wire installed on 3 sides and it's pretty ugly. Yeah, it's pretty ugly. So this is gonna be our temporary compost bin. Before we move on to show you how I'm gonna do this door, if you've done the research and decided that wire is good enough for you, as I told you earlier, use a heavier gauge, something like a 1/2x1 or 1x2, so that it'll last. And I would also suggest to frame in around the top with 2x6s or 2x8s, so that you'd have some structure and some support. We're not gonna do that. And it give you something to lay on to your top. On our door, we're gonna use a piece of metal that's cut 4 foot wide by 3 foot tall and a couple T-posts to secure that in. We wanna be able to remove that door when it becomes time to stir or empty the bin. So I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do that, and it's just gonna be temporary, and we're gonna use a couple pieces of rope. Now we want our door removable. So when we put this up here, we don't want to drive our post in the ground, because as we fill this, it's gonna push back and you still wouldn't be able to slide it out. So instead, we're just gonna put our piece of metal up on each post as snug as we can get it, and then take your T-post and just push it in the ground if you got soft ground. If not, you might have to dig just a short little hole, but you don't want to bury it because you want to be able to remove it when you need to turn this. Then we're gonna pull it back against it and just tie us a little loop that we can slide up and down. Bitches is loud. So now if we want to take this down, we can just lift this up over our post, remove our T-post on both sides, and move this out of the way to flip and work our bin. So now we'll just cut our rope and we'll repeat the process. The knife needs shortening. Self-admittedly, it is ugly, but it's gonna be purposeful, it's gonna work. So y'all join me back here on the next video and we'll talk about the carbons and the different ratios and how it needs to be mixed. And we'll add some stuff to this so we can start watching it break down over the next few months. That way we'll have some good premium soil. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see you back next time.